What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team. What is up, Mr. Ray? What's up, dudes? How you doing, Ray?
What's going on, Wes? Life is good. It's summertime in Canada, so it's the 3 weeks of the year where we get sunlight. And so I'm enjoying every bit of it. Going away for the weekend, little romantic getaway with Sarah.
Nice. What are you doing?
So, well, it was supposed to be visit your daughter weekend at camp because she's in overnight camp for a month. But with COVID cases on the rise, they canceled that. So we just decided to, and so we had got a little country house close to the camp, and we decided to just keep it and have just a little nice weekend on our own. There was going to be a bunch of other camp parents who were going to be joining us, and I had the feeling it was going to be a bit of a frat house. So it's really much more what I'm interested in, just like a weekend of just and I, and it's a perfect laboratory to practice what we're talking about with this book. I'll see how many dates I can squeeze out of this one weekend.
Yeah. So for the guys catching up on where we're at right now, we are going to be reading as a team. Whoever wants to join this book, John Gottman, 8 Dates. It is sort of the workbook to John Gottman's book called 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, which is one of the most famous relationship books on the market, I'd say, and it's been that way for a long time. So anybody who's interested in reading this book along with us, I would definitely recommend it. You should read both books, but probably read this book first if you're already in a relationship or looking to be in a relationship soon, because this will give you the practical action steps to put that primary book in place. And you'll still learn the fundamentals of 7 principles in this book as well.
If you don't get around to reading the chapter, Gottman has for each of the 8 dates. We'll be going maybe 1 or 2 dates per session. They have a speed dating section, which is just an abstract of each date, which is just like a quick 1 page. So you can just blast through that 5 minutes before the pod for any of you who don't do their homework.
Yes, exactly. And Gunther, good morning. He's saying a lot of changes coming today. Hope those are good changes. Let's see, Gunther, feel free to share, man. And then Ray, I don't know if there's a case on your phone or something, but there's a reverb now. We will get this audio right at some point, so I can hear myself talking, but not word for word, just like some sort of vibration. But if nobody else can hear it, I'm all good. Okay, so let's see. All right, so for those of you who are reading along, Ray and I are going to talk the introduction. So right now we're just saying before we hopped on this, like this book is so dense that it's hard to read it without highlighting 80% of the words that are written. And Ray, I think you found the same problem, right? Or same good problem.
Yeah. Slight reverb. Zach is saying there's what was that? There's some kind of Jimi Hendrix album called Slight Return or something. But so I'll just mute myself when I'm not speaking.
No, you're good on your side. It's when I talk. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I know we're like a chimp with a machine gun here. It's like neither of us is really confident to give advice on the tech. But so the introduction of this book gives you a kind of overview of the Gottman method. I never heard of the Gottman method before I met Wes. He introduced me to John Gottman and the relationship coaching, the marriage coaching that this guy does. After meeting you, Wes, and after all our conversations, I went to a Gottman specialist marriage counselor for about 6 months, I think, and really helped us get into all these, really practice all these issues that we're going to talk about over the course of this book club here. Conflict,
Yeah. And Ray, I'm not being rude. I'm writing down notes as you talk. Like right now, I'm going to look up a Gottman specialist.
for you and your teddy bear. Yeah, I think you guys can really, really get the breakthroughs you're looking for. Yeah, so like I used to think that, most of us, or plenty of us, or I for sure, had a fucked up concept of what a happy home is, right? How parents are supposed to check in with each other, navigate stress, have healthy conflict when they disagree. Like I did not get a good modeling of that kind of thing growing up. I'm sure you didn't either, Wes, right?
No.
And I'm sure, and in fact, I'm sure
90% of people
most of us don't. Most of our parents aren't born with relationship management wisdom, right? So I used to say, I kind of cracked the coach. He's like, you know what I just realized is that all he does is he makes us fight when we're in these sessions, and he helps us learn how to fight, right? And so it's exactly what it is. It's learning how to navigate conflict and communicate through conflict so that you don't just cram stuff down, which is our kind of like default. A lot of us, that's our default kind of emotional tool, right? And so the great quote right on the first page, when it comes to conflict, as it inevitably does when we weave two lives together, it is our commitment to being curious rather than correct that allows us to turn toward instead of away from one another in moments of disagreement. And that's something, I mean, I don't know about you, but that I really relish and savor being correct, and when in recovery rooms, I remember I heard the expression, true maturity or true wisdom or something is knowing you're right and letting the other person win the argument, right? Like just backing off and saying, if they want to die on that hill, that's fine.
Yes. Yeah. And the mental model, do you want to be right or do you want to be rich? I think can be applied to those scenarios. Like, do you want to be right in the moment or do you want to win the long game?
Right. And the next quote I highlighted is, a true love story isn't a fairy tale. It takes vulnerability and effort. And that's something you come back to time and time again, that everything is a practice, right? Being good at martial arts is a practice. Being good at dance is a practice. Being fit is a practice. And even all the ethereal things like being romantic, having good taste in food, music, wine, everything is a practice, right? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Do you want to give the gentleman a quick synopsis of John Gottman, Julie Gottman, the Love Lab in Seattle, and why they are considered such experts in the field?
Yeah, that's a great intro, because basically I think we've talked about here on before, using a mental model of the forehead score. So I often try to give whoever, if I'm receiving advice from somebody or somebody's commenting on something I'm doing, I try to very quickly use the mental model of like, okay, Ray's about to tell me about relationships. On a scale of 0 to 10, how qualified is he? So if he scores a 4 in my brain, I'm going to weight that effectively. So I think it's a good model for everybody to use. And I have to use it in investing and finance all the time because everybody has opinions. So, and I got that mental model as an abbreviated version from Ray Dalio's Principles books. That being said, you might say, okay, well, why is John Gottman qualified to give relationship advice? And number one, he is kind of known as the Michael Jordan of relationship psychotherapy because he conducted, at least from my understanding, the largest study that's ever been done in history on relationships. And the way that he did that was extremely analytical. I think him and his wife and a couple of the researchers did this. I believe his wife is a graduate from MIT. So they took all of this data, and how they do that? Well, they created what were called these love labs. So they would send couples into an apartment for, I believe, and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, either a full weekend or at least several days. And they would have all of these cameras and different sensors around the apartment, including sensors in the toilets to measure stress hormones from urine. And then they would analyze all of these metrics, including zooming in on people's facial expressions, and I believe measuring, I don't know, to like the half second or something. Like it was crazy, the minute detail they put even on the time aspect of measuring facial expressions. And they had a whole team of researchers, and then they would walk through and they told the couples, live life as you normally live. Obviously, if you feel like there's cameras all around you, you're going to behave a little bit differently. But they said, like, weirdly enough, people got relatively used to it pretty quickly. And I think eventually, right, like you kind of just get used to the stuff being around you. But anyway, it's from my understanding, it's the largest data set that exists on relationships. And the reason that I like this is because it's actual data. It's not just some guy commenting on his anecdotal experience. And from my understanding, eventually they've analyzed thousands of these people. I think it was originally like 100 or something like that. So you could not get, I don't know of any other way that has been done so far that was so in depth. So much so to the point where this guy became famous, John Gottman, because he could predict divorce, I think within a 10 to 15 minute conversation with 90-ish% accuracy, which is crazy. So that's how eventually he started blowing up in terms of fame. And then I would go to relationship conferences every once in a while, or just like psychology conferences every once in a while. And you cannot go to one of these conferences without his name being brought up. So that's the forehead score. So if anybody deserves a 10 out of 10 on their forehead for this particular topic, it is him. And he particularly highlights the fact that what Ray is saying is like all relationships inevitably have conflict. So get over it, get used to it, and figure out coping mechanisms to get through it, which is what Ray is saying. So, Ray, was that a fair intro? Would you say anything else about God?
Absolutely. That's perfect. And something else that comes up, like another statistic to chew on, is that they've analyzed. So he's been doing this for 30 years, right? Like compiling this data, same-sex couples, heterosexual couples, married couples, long-term not married, just started dating. Like every variable has, and every type of relationship has been studied in order to come up with a really universal human kind of roadmap, right? In the advent of dating apps like Tinder, they have studied those, and they found that what apps like Tinder do is they match you with someone who, like, they match a dog person with a dog person. They match an outdoorsy person with an outdoorsy person, right? It's just a same like, same kind of model. And they have a 4% success rate of matching you with a long-term partner. 4% out of 100.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And
4%.
that's because we are actually attracted to difference, right? At the instinctual biological level, we're attracted to difference to kind of diversify the genetic pool, the gene pool. And then and John and Julie Gottman go into it like she's outdoorsy, right? And likes to hike and ski and stuff. And he's what he calls an indoorsman. Right, because he's all bookish and just and she's super OCD clean. He's a charming slob, he calls himself. And so the point is they have a rich love life because they learn how to navigate these differences.
Yes.
Right. Differences are not a deal breaker. I've been with for more than 20 years. And we went through a long period where she tried to make me the same as her. Like she tried to absorb me into her world. And it was a source of, I didn't know it at the time because I wanted it too. Right. But that is not a recipe for a successful relationship. Right. Because ultimately she doesn't want me to turn into a clone of her. She wants me to be me. She was attracted to me. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so you talked about the micro expressions that the Love Lab captured. Another quote here from the beginning of the book: successful long-term relationships are created through small words, small gestures, and small acts. A lifetime of love is created every single day that you're together. So that's why the format of this book is a series of 8 dates, right? It's not a roadmap of 8 years to how to spend 8 years together. It's 8 individual dates. Yeah. Meals, coffees. And why it's more than, and the reason it's not just one date is because, as you know, like as I just mentioned, perfection is not the price of love. Practice is, right? Mm-hmm. Love is a practice. We practice how to express our love and how to receive our partner's love. Love is an action even more than a feeling. It requires intention and attention, a practice that John and Julie call attunement.
Yes, exactly. And Ray, if you don't mind, I want to comment on Gunther's note over here in the chat. Yeah. Gunther, if you don't mind me, I'm gonna highlight you here. But you said, how do we recognize what obstacles are able to overcome and when it's time to move on? I have a funny feeling that this is a relevant question for Gunther. So
chapter 2, I believe, is conflict, right? Yeah. And this sounds like a conflict issue, right?
Yeah, and I would say my response to Gunther's note would be,
hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to rhomasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Have you ever seen that presentation where I think it was a professor and he put this big glass jar on the table, and then he tried to put like little pebbles in the jar and fill it up, and then eventually couldn't put the larger rocks in the jar? Have you ever seen that presentation? And it's about living a full life. Super cool. Anyway, long story short, it's about the sequence in which he puts in the thing. So like, for instance, if you put in, so Gunther's saying he's familiar with it. So just a quick little summary on that. There's a professor who gave a story about like how to fill up your life. And he had pebbles, he had large rocks, and he had sand, and he had water. And if you put the pebbles in first, then the large rocks cannot fit in, right? You guys can probably get the visual here. As opposed to if you put in the larger rocks first and then put in the pebbles, they can fit between the crevices. And then he says, okay, is life filled up yet? And then the students say, oh yeah. And then he said, oh, well, how about the sand? Then you put in the sand, it can fill in the crevices even more. He says, is life filled up yet? And they say, oh yeah. And they said, okay, well, I can put in water too. So the whole point is like, you can fit a whole bunch of a bunch in life if you take the proper sequence to things. So for Gunther, what I would say is, might sound counterintuitive. If you're working on something right now, I would say go to the macro stuff first. So those large rocks would be the macro things. So if you're hanging on by a thread, honestly, kind of weirdly and timely enough, I would literally go through this book. The book goes through the 8 macro conversations to have with your partner, if that makes sense. So you guys might be experiencing some sort of conflict right now, but my guess is maybe it's a bunch of minor things, because the human brain will focus, like I think Zig Ziglar said, like most people major on minor things. So if you guys don't have the macro stuff down yet, I would almost say as a relationship, you guys might not be even qualified to make that call. And, I say that respectfully. Like I would say, Gunther, it seems like you spent a lot of time with this girl, and I'm kind of reading between the lines here. I think it would deserve this conversation, like reading this book together, going through the workbook and doing it together. That way you can figure out on a macro level if you guys are on the same page. And if not, can you reconcile it? This book will also teach you how to reconcile that, because you'll experience micro conflict in between there. So honestly, man, Gunther, that's how I would say, if you're about to call something off and this person has been special to you in the past, realize you're going to have likely the same conflicts in the future, most likely. I've experienced the same thing, by the way, so I'm not throwing stones. So I'd be curious what would happen if you committed to reading this book, and if she would be willing to read and do this book along with you. Ray, what would your comments on that be?
Let me read the following paragraph. For newly committed couples, and I'm assuming that Gunther's talking about a relatively new relationship, we want to emphasize that conflict will happen in any relationship. But if you avoid conflict now, you're guaranteed to have a lot more conflict later. The early part of a relationship, besides the fun and infatuation, is about establishing trust and a shared future. Inevitably, there will be bumps in the road as you try to navigate 2 different lives, 2 different childhoods, 2 different family histories. Listen and learn, share and invite. If you have an open heart and mind, your dates will go much better, and your life together will too. As couples that have been married a long time, John and Julie know what it's like to face issues that are difficult to discuss, to fail to understand each other, or even to question our marriage. This is all normal, and by bravely tackling these conversations head on, you will enter into a marriage or a relationship that's strong and resilient. Now, this is not something that's easy, right? Like bringing up topics like navigating conflict is uncomfortable. That's why they call it conflict. But this is just the key is if you avoid conflict now, you're guaranteed to have a lot more conflict later. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, and I would say Gunther, put in the chat that he's been with her about a year, and I would say Gunther to that, and I had to learn this lesson myself, and I still learn it every day. And it's that quote of like, time is not a measure of progress. Progress is a measure of progress. So you can go an entire year and not discuss these core values. And if I were so for instance, by the way, I'm experiencing something very similar
decades. You can go decades
without a doubt. There's no doubt about it. Like if I were to go to, let's say Gunther, you, and go to her and ask her about your values in these 8 core topics, and then if I were to ask you about her values in these 8 core topics, would you guys be correct? And if you're not correct about the other's values, then it seems like you have not gone in depth in these conversations. And Gunther, obviously, feel free to come on, but I think you're usually at work when you're listening to this. So Gunther's saying he's probably not on the same page for sure. So then Gunther, as a brother to brother, what I would tell you is like, make a decision if you think there's at least enough opportunity to go through these conversations. And I would say probably, just shooting from the hip, you guys probably owe it to each other if you're about to just cut it off and never talk again. If you think she's special enough in the past, then there's most likely that she could be special enough in the future, considering you go through the work together. Because I would be, and I've gone through similar patterns, Gunther, I would be curious if maybe there's been similar patterns for you in the past, just like there's been similar patterns for me in the past. And it's like Tony Robbins says, the problem when you hop from relationship to relationship is you bring you to the next relationship. So anyway, just throwing some food for thought out there. But I'm taking this medicine just as much as I'm suggesting it. So I'm a novice, just like everybody else in this. But literally, the next girl that I date, like, we will be going through this. Like, there is no other option. I would also say, as you go through this book, please do your homework, in my opinion, prior. Like, literally go through and on these topics, even in the introduction section, like, journal about it, write notes about it, talk to other men about it, talk to other women about it. Like, I'm literally taking notes as Ray is talking to me about it. So like, try to get as much juice out of this as possible. That's why we will be going through only the introduction today, because it is so unbelievably dense, but it's important. Like, this is the person who you pick to spend the rest of your life with. I don't know, call me crazy, but it seems like that is by far going to be the number one decision you make. So like, what we need to treat this like a master's degree, in my opinion.
100%. John Walter just made a great comment there. Makes me think of the importance of learning how to be good at relationships is essential. I'll read off this next section. The quality of our closest relationships, more than any other factor, determines our physical health, resistance to disease, and longevity. Satisfying close relationships also improve various dimensions of each other's partner's mental health. Happy marriages or long-term relationships can significantly reduce depressions, anxiety disorders, addictions, and antisocial behavior, and reduce the incidence of suicide. In addition, many studies have shown that ongoing unhappy relationships can damage the cognitive and emotional well-being of children, while happy relationships can strengthen children's school performance, peer relations, and emotional intelligence. So we talk about being a leader to your family and in your relationship, in your family, and in your community. And being an effective leader, these are skills you need in order to create a home where you can thrive, your partner can thrive, your children can thrive.
Yep, without a doubt. And a couple important things here. So basically, this introduction is gearing you up to talk to your partner and giving you a format to which to talk to each other. So for instance, like asking open-ended questions instead of asking closed-ended questions, just not yes or no questions, but open-ended questions where the person can elaborate. I am warning you that two things, and they talk about this in the introduction. Number one, you have to be vulnerable. The output is only as good as the input. So if you're giving false information or information that you just want the other party to see, you're a dead man walking. There's almost no use in even doing the exercise, because if Ray and I are in a relationship, let's say, and he's giving me false readings, I'm going to be pinging off of those false readings. So we're not going to get much benefit. So I would say definitely have the balls to go and be super vulnerable in these conversations. Get to the truth quicker and you will be able to solve it quicker, right? The next thing is give your partner that same respect, because obviously if you both are playing full out, you're going to be telling each other stuff that most likely you haven't told anybody else, and vice versa. Why? Because it's scary. We're social creatures and we want to be able to rely on people, especially our partner. Now, you will likely learn something that is not enjoyable to learn about your partner. Like, I have experienced this, and my first thought in my head is like, ew, like, I want nothing to do with you. But then I remember Jordan Peterson's conversation. Like, you're not virtuous if you're a bunny rabbit. Why? Because a bunny rabbit is not harmful. But here's the thing, you don't want to be a bunny rabbit in life. In order to be virtuous, you have to not act monstrously. And the way to know you're not acting monstrously is if you've acted monstrously in the past. So you know you have an inner monster, but you're not allowing that inner monster to come out. Give the same respect to your partner. You do not, in my opinion, you do not want to date a bunny rabbit. That person doesn't really bring, I say this respectfully, doesn't bring the type of value to life that you probably need in a partner. You will need a former monster. Because why? Because life can get chaotic. Life can bring up problems. Like, I want a woman who can say like, no, you're not going to do that to my child. You're not going to treat my child that way. Or like, no, you're not going to talk to my husband that way. Like, you want somebody with a backbone. Somebody who has a backbone probably has a past that is not ideal on paper. I hope that makes sense to everybody.
That is the maturing process.
Yep.
Right. The monster, the person who has the ability to be a monster but elects not to, has reached that level of maturity where they know what tools to use and what tools not to use, and that comes from experience and training and time.
And I will give an example of this. Literally, I know this is going to sound a little weird. I do a lot of business with a handful of men that are a product of AA. So they would say they're addicts, right? Because AA teaches you to say that you are an addict, like you're always an addict, but they are a recovered addict. And Ray, correct me on the terminology if I need to be corrected.
No, you got it. The reason they have to always be on guard for the addiction to rear its ugly head again. Mm-hmm. So they remind themselves on a daily basis that they are an addict and go.
Yep, exactly. Now, the reason I love working with them is because essentially they have gone through a bridge to now new, better behavior. So they have been taught a code of conduct versus most people have not been taught a code of conduct. So if you find yourself in a place of judgment on your partner when you're having these conversations, I would say if you can, please tell your brain to be quiet. Because if there's no judgment, that probably means you're dating a bunny rabbit. And at some point in the future, that bunny rabbit will be tested and not able to perform. Right? So I'd rather you go into these conversations, and even if you feel like you're dating a former monster, that is probably a good indicator, not a bad indicator, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I love what you just said. Those people that are in recovery, I can relate to this because I am as well. That's part of their journey. Right. And so they are battle tested and battle hardened. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right. And stronger for that. They're not weaker for that. So when I suppose, and I'm going off script here, I'm not talking about the book, but I'm just riffing with you. Yeah. If this might be what they mean when they say, listen without judgment, non-judgmentally, is that if your girlfriend or wife was a slut in a past life, or was a addict, or was broke, or was a diva or a bitch or something, to listen without judgment means that you understand that that's just part of their journey, and that's part of the monster they have inside that they have learned to civilize out of their behavior.
100%. Exactly. Is exactly right. And just know that she will extend the same respect to you. Like,
man, that is a practice. That is absolutely a practice, because I'm a judgment machine. And I think that Shaman has talked about this. Matt McCusker has talked about this, where we're biologically programmed to scan for threats. So I see Asian man, white man, black woman, gay guy, like super buff guy, shitty car, poor person, fancy car, rich person. Like I'm just a judgment machine labeling everybody like the Terminator with that kind of computer eye,
Yep.
And so that that behavior does not always serve me well when I'm just going to 7-Eleven to get some Skittles. I don't, do you know what I mean? That kind of like,
absolutely.
That's kind of, I guess that's kind of my monster where I have to, or when I'm driving, like that, I'm not a very virtuous driver, I guess is what I'm saying, right? Where I haven't really mastered the art of keeping that monster in a cage. So listening without judgment. Now there's a list of skills.
Oh, and real quick, just so you know, John, I was not giving a funny smiley face to your comment. It was to Kaizen's comment. So John, I have not had a chance to read your comment yet. Quick side note, sorry, in the chat.
John said, and John, if you don't mind, I'll read it out loud. I had a third date with a girl I couldn't get a read on last night. She's smart and cute and very nice, but not communicative, not clear, and a great practice for me to not over ask what she didn't want to openly discuss. Great girl, total bunny rabbit. I asked about past relationships, and she hadn't processed the one that ended a year ago, which told me a lot of what I wanted to know without conversation. Makes me think of another thing that that is a practice: listening without offering advice and fixing. Right? That's something I think I naturally want to give advice, fix, and help people who aren't looking for help. Right? For example, an artist friend came in from New York this weekend, and I'm like, oh, let me introduce you to this gallery. Let me introduce that gallery. And I found myself kind of forcing my assistance on them. Right? So I decided to switch it up and take the approach of just kind of like, in terms of relationship terms, listening without offering advice or without trying to fix. Right? Because listening is a gift.
Oh, dude. And I would say actively practicing trying to listen so hard, so intently that you can summarize the logic back to them. Dude, when somebody does that to me, because oftentimes if Ray's asking me questions, I'm giving him a stream of consciousness. It's not exactly packaged with a little bow on it. But if Ray can listen to me, absorb it, and then say, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. You did that, your father left when you were 4 years old. He didn't show up for your birthday, which was a very important thing in your life at that time, probably still is. And now you feel like you can't rely on anybody because if your father didn't show up for you, who the hell else is going to show up for you? Now that he could get that one little sentence or two sentences from probably an hour of me just like vomiting on him. So if you can do that to a person, summarize and put a little bow on it, holy hell, you feel understood. You feel heard and you feel understood.
And what's the technical term? The reflective, or it's like reflective.
So sometimes they call it active listening, but the only reason I'm not saying active listening is actually John Gottman is not a fan of active listening, so I don't want to confuse the terms necessarily. Okay. But I think it's pretty helpful to be able to, I call it like almost like summary listening. Just repeating back and like, okay, here's the summary. Do I understand it? And dude, oftentimes, if somebody's good at that, it's valuable for me. It's like, holy shit, you just pieced those macro things together in a short, efficient sentence. Now I can use that in the future. But if Ray says to me without my permission, right, like, oh, Wes, like you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Like why would you do that? You shouldn't feel that way. Just move on.
What you should do.
Exactly.
Right. Is XYZ. Right.
Yeah. So that's what I would say this introduction part is for. It's like setting the stage. Here's the macro topics. We'll get ready for the macro topics. Here's how you need to approach it. Approach it with an open mind. Approach it via open conversations, and approach it without any judgment on the opposite party, and be vulnerable. And also why Gottman is qualified to give us this advice.
That's a great segue into the next section of the book, The Art of Listening. Right. And I know we've talked about this before, and you've read other experts on the body language of listening and what you just talked about, active listening. or reflective listening. His advice, be attentive.
And keep going. I've got to answer my mom, so keep going.
Sure.
Myself.
So just some bullet points on the art of listening. Be attentive. And don't interrupt. So that don't interrupt part is tricky for me. That's where we just listen, even if we have the answer to all their problems. We probably don't. But lean forward, make eye contact, don't interrupt. Next is be present. Conversation is about dialogue. So put down your device. Be present. Like Wes said, ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask a question and then listen to an answer. Asking a question indicates to the person that you are meaningfully engaged in what they're saying. Tune in. It's your job as a listener to tune into your partner's feelings. You don't have to make your partner feel better or cheer them up. Your goal is simply to listen and try to understand. Again, that's hard for us as men because we want to look at the owner's manual and put it together. Mm-hmm. We're not used to just listening.
Oh yeah.
And then witness, and then bear witness. This is it. Finally, or you know what? No, it goes on. Witness. A big part of listening is witnessing. This means you listen so your partner doesn't feel so alone. A powerful way to witness and to be there for your partner is to repeat back in your own words what you have heard your partner saying, and thus communicate validation, which is what we just talked about.
Yep.
Sounds like you're really upset with your friend and how she's been so demanding and judgmental. It makes total sense to me why you'd feel that way. It's an example of what you can do. And finally, or carrying on, avoid judgment. Don't be critical and don't give advice unless your partner asks for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So these are
thing to that.
Go ahead.
And sorry, Ray, did I cut you off, bud?
No, go ahead.
One tool that I have found to be very effective, if I can remember when I'm doing it, is I call it intellectual empathy, because I'm part robot. So like I don't have the natural, if Ray tells me a story, I tend not to feel something. So what I have to do is bridge the gap. And I do feel like a lot of guys deal with that. Like, and it's almost the opposite. It's like, dude, get over it. Like, what the fuck, why would you care about that? But so I needed to create a bridge. That bridge for me I call it intellectual empathy. So it's taking what Ray is saying and then saying, oh, okay, he's saying this, this, and this. If I put myself in his shoes or a similar thing that I could relate to, oh, okay, I remember when somebody before didn't return my phone call and didn't do that. Oh yeah, that made me feel bad. Oh shit. Now I can emotionally calibrate with Ray. And I do think a lot of females automatically do this. Like they don't have to go through the intellectual steps, but I can tell you as robotic as this sounds, it helps me a ton. And then that is what then changes my facial expressions. Like, oh shit, because now I'm putting myself through it. But it doesn't happen automatically for me. I have to literally force myself to do it. So anyway, so Ray, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Like, I guess the challenge is, I guess this takes practice, like if you're listening to what somebody's saying and then like entering the deepest recesses of your mind to try and find a similar experience that you went through, it might seem to them like you're thinking about like sports highlights or something, right? So, as long as you remain present during that empathic comparison you're making, I think it's totally fine.
Yep, got it. Completely agree. So I think those are a few things that will help, and it's a great introduction to this book. We'd love to have you guys go with us on this journey. I can tell you, I wish I would have read this. I've already read it, I think, twice, but I wanted to now do it with somebody. I wish I would have read it when I was a teenager, like literally 100%. And then actually commit to fucking doing it. Like this is a workbook. It's not just a passive reading book. Like please, and you might as well do it along with us. Like if you have a female to do it with, then let's do it. And even if you don't have a female to do it, then commit to journaling about this. So that way, one day when you do have a female to do this with, like you're ready to go. Mm-hmm. You know your values and you're ready to have those conversations.
Yeah. So so I'm going to suggest the format of 2 dates per pod. So on Monday we'll discuss date 1 and date 2.
Yep.
Friday we'll discuss 3 and 4, and so on. And just to give the gentleman a preview, the first date you discuss with your partner trust and commitment, because trust is the foundation of any strong relationship, a business, marital, romantic, ride share, like everything relies on trust. Right? So trust and commitment. Date 2, so lean on me is the number 1. Date 2, addressing conflict, like we've discussed earlier. When you trust someone with your embarrassing secrets, or you trust someone, with your disgusting habit or whatever, you can navigate the difference. So agree to disagree. Again, that's not letting someone walk all over you. That's just how to navigate conflict in a healthy way. Date 3 is sex and intimacy. Let's get it on. Date 4 is work and money. Date 5 is family. Date 6 is fun and adventure. Date 7 is growth and spirituality. And date 8 is dreams. So these are 8 separate categories that we really need to be discussing with our partners in order to get their help and reaching these, right? Like sex and intimacy. We need to talk about what we like and what we don't like. Work and money. We need to talk about what our goals are, right? Spirituality, dreams, right? Like this is why we put our values, our goals, and our vision board down on paper, Wes, is to be able to achieve them better, but also to communicate with them so that we can have a team member helping us get there faster.
Yep.
So those are the 8 dates, and we'll discuss trust and conflict on Monday.
Perfect. And then Gunther, what I would throw out to you, bud, to maybe consider is before you call it off, because it seems like that's what you're hinting at doing, maybe bring this book up to her and say, hey, in my opinion, maybe letting her know where you're at, like where your headspace is, like, hey, I'm coming to you on the 1 yard line here. Like we're very close to the red zone. Would you be up for going through a couple of exercises with me to see if we can save this? And more importantly, see if you can save me psychologically from this. So Gunther, that's not advice. I'm just sharing you like my personal opinion. I wish that I would have done that in the past, because I did in the past just be like, basically say like, okay, well, if you're not good enough, like I've observed your behavior long enough and now I've decided no. And then I would bring this on to the person. They'd say, what the hell? Like, I thought we were good. I've done that in the past. I've also hovered my hand over the eject button a lot in the past, like constantly threatening. This was years and years ago. That wasn't good. Then I went on the other extreme, not communicating anything. And then all of a sudden just breaking up. And then in my last relationship, I then learned to express my needs, but I did it very late in the game. And it just felt like a fucking like waterfall crashing down on her. I literally handed her a document and I told you guys that I did that. In hindsight, I think I did it a little too forcefully, and it was a lot. So now I'm going to pretend like we're wiping the slate clean. I'm going to show her my needs document. We're going to go through this and we're going to read through this book together. And that is the prerequisite to get back together. So now we kind of have a full spectrum of where Ray and I are at and where Gunther's at, and hopefully Gunther's willing to share his journey along with us too. So, and guys, also please share your journey along with us, but we'd highly recommend you reading this book along with us and doing the work in the book.
Right. It's as it says in the book, it's never too early or too late to have these conversations. You can do it at the beginning. And you don't have to do it to save a relationship. You can do it to strengthen a relationship. Even if the relationship you think is on solid ground, these conversations will nourish the relationship, because there's you, there's her, and then there's the relationship. So you can be solid, she can be solid, but you have to nourish the relationship, which is the vines of love that connect you guys.
Yep, exactly. And last piece on this, one thing to hit on the intro in this book is basically, and I'm summarizing, yes, love is a feeling, but it's also an action. And I would personally say, if I were looking at it as a ratio, it is 10% feeling, 90% action. And in the beginning, it feels like the opposite. It's if not completely, like it's just 100% like infatuation versus like, in my opinion, love should be more of a verb. And then when you get those glimpses of the feelings, awesome. But like focus on doing the loving activities. And I would put this in that category.
Love as a verb. What are you going to do this weekend, Ray? I'm going to love my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. And then going through this and developing a list of what the fuck does that mean?
Right.
Like that's the cool shit.
Listening,
man.
Showing up.
Exactly. When you can
getting in fights.
Exactly. When you can get to a mode of where you get through all the stuff, you're on the same values and you know the person's needs, and then you like those are the rocks, and then you know the little pebbles to fit in the sand and the water in between those pebbles. Like that's where you get to the cool shit where you can get out ahead of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So for instance, right, like little things like writing little love notes, having a love note jar. They like you just pull one out every single day, send her a picture of it. I now have coffee cups in my apartment where, like, you know, when you get a coffee cup at like, I don't know, Starbucks or like some sort of boutique coffee place, and they write a little note on the coffee sleeve, like, hey, you're handsome, like whatever it is. So I now have that little stuff to like, you know.
That might be a more lived experience unique to you, Wes. But I know that they misspell my name. Or they at least do that, which is cute.
Yeah.
But something else, Wes, is that even if you're not in a relationship, we're going to learn about ourselves through this process.
Yes.
Right. Even if you are in a relationship, we're going to learn about ourselves through this process. Vision board, values, goals. These are not just things we hand to people. These are things that strengthen our sense of self, our sense of self-esteem, our sense of knowing thyself, knowing what we want, and what we need to work on and what we need to be proud of.
Yes. And also keep in mind, like, if you haven't been committed to the scorecard, and I need to remind myself of this, like, please keep on recommitting to the scorecard, because that will build your skill every single day. And even in our scorecard, we have an act of love, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like doing the love, doing the thing, doing the verb of love that's in the scorecard, and all the other things that come along. So Ray, anything else to add to any of this stuff, brother?
No, sir. My sleep has been garbage this week. There's something about starting this new corporate job that it's an adjustment of like I'm making dinner, I'm making breakfast most of the time. And it's just like, there's a different stress dynamic in the house. So that's affecting my sleep, but I'm leaning on my scorecard. The learning segment I've just been reading this book, journaling on it, chugging my water, working out like a machine, eating healthy. Yeah, the weight's not flying off me, but I'm still down 10 pounds from my, my high. And I'm still on the path of progress, and I fucking love it.
Hell yeah. All right, Beast. Right back at you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Wes.
Let me know if you guys need me in the meantime. We'll talk on Monday. Later, dudes.